I'm watching a movie or anything, I'm always watching the subtitles. I actually prefer to watch the subtitles than the actual like people talking on the movie or the show.
Yeah, I find that can be a little bit distracting because I like to see the acting and then I'm like, no, look at the
Yeah.
face and then don't know what they say before they're actually going to say it
Yeah.
and miss the acting that they do. Okay. Okay, so we're recording. Welcome, Marissa, you gorgeous goddess. You're like so full of baby and
Yeah.
like beautiful energy right now. I'm so excited to have you. So why don't you start by maybe introducing yourself and like yeah, what your life looks like right now. And then we can get into also your mothering journey, like wherever that starts for you.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Yay, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I don't even know where to start. I'm Marissa. I am a mama of two and pregnant with my third baby, due any day now. They yeah, it's been a very adventurous journey, especially with the third pregnancy because it is a wild pregnancy. So I am just like, yeah, solely relying on my intuition and baby's energy. So it has been it's been very fun. And yeah, so I'm a mama of again, yeah, two and a half, three almost three. I'm also a wife and a homemaker. And yeah, I also have like a couple designations, which I hate throwing those designations out there because I feel like it just like keeps you in a box, and I'm so done with
Mm-hmm.
being in like boxes. Like I want this like expansion and like this like growth, and like fitting myself in these boxes are just like so limiting for me now. So, but I do have some education in nutrition, holistic nutrition, and pediatric feeding and nutrition as well too. That was my original passion when I had my first baby. And I really wanted to focus on supporting moms and like just supporting them after they had their baby. And like a lot of babies experiencing like these digestive issues and these discomforts. And yeah, so this is like, that was where like my heart was at, was just wanting, I just wanted to help. I just wanted to help. I always knew that I wanted to help. I always knew that I wanted to serve. And I always knew that I wanted to work with mothers and children. And it's so funny because before I even started my journey into motherhood, I had a boyfriend like when I was a teenager, and his dad said, "I see you working with children." And I'm like, "No way. Like I want nothing to do with children. Like I don't like children. I want nothing to do with them. I don't want to work with them." And then I ended up taking early childhood education, which is
Oh
so
wow.
honestly, I hated it because it was so
Mhm.
limiting. Like I remember looking at like the caps that they put on um ECEs and like where they're like how much money and how much expansion they could experience. And I was like, this is not me. Like I don't want this, but I still knew like in my mind like there was something there with children. I just didn't know what it was. So yeah, that is kind of like the gist of my life right now and the gist
Did you ever
of
work as an
work.
ECE? Just curious.
I did like some co-op when I was in high school.
Yeah.
I did some co-op, and that was pretty much it. I worked at a junior and senior kindergarten, which I absolutely loved. Like I loved being around like the kids. It was just when they started to like throw tantrums, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with I don't want to deal with this. But I loved working with them. Like there's such like innocence and purity to them. And like I just remember like just feeling like a child, connecting with them and like playing with them and like just being on their level of like curiosity. Like it's so beautiful to watch
Mm.
them. Like it was just so beautiful. But one thing that really like that was really hard for me was watching like when the parents would come and drop them like the little ones off, like the 3 4 year olds off, and they would just cry and cry and cry for their parents. Like they were so distraught that their parents would leave. And like I remember the teachers would like pull the kids away and the parents would like run down the hallway, and I'm like, how is this okay? Like this, like like it was just so awful to watch that. That was one thing that really like turned me off about like the whole um I guess, school system too, like, especially at such a young
Mm,
age. Like, I was just like, "Ugh, this doesn't feel right." Like, of course, this is the conditioning that I had of like, kids go to school, parents leave, that's it. But like now when I seen that, I was like, there's something not okay about this. Why is this happening? Why are these kids so freaking traumatized? And like the parents are just okay with it. Like it's just, yeah, that's a little rant. I don't know where that came from.
mm. Yeah, it might serve someone who's listening. Yeah.
What an adventure. So yeah, now I'm experiencing my wild pregnancy, which I never ever thought that I would get to this place. And for those who don't know what a wild pregnancy is, it's completely like separating yourself from the system, not, relying on any like procedures or like testing, not relying on any external, I guess, support from a medical doctor, from an OB, from a nurse midwife, and just like really tuning into your body and into your heart and into your womb and into like your baby, and like really feeling and connecting into that and letting that guide you. So yeah, I knew, like, as soon as I got pregnant, I was like, this is what I want to do. And my husband's like, Marissa, you're crazy. What, like, is this even safe? And I'm like, I feel like it's a lot more safer than exposing yourself to strangers who know absolutely nothing about you or nothing about
Mhm,
your baby or your womb or your body. And just, yeah, like I felt like that was just something that I wanted to keep so intimate, like my pregnancy, my baby, my body. Like I didn't want strangers to touch me. I didn't want anybody to touch
mhm,
me. I didn't want any like ultrasounds or any of that, because it just felt so like it felt so invasive.
mhm.
Invasive, yeah. And I wanted to
So
keep it very
before this pregnancy, you hadn't even talked to your husband about the possibility of like a wild pregnancy? Did it come a bit of as a shock to him, like
yeah.
that would be your decision?
Yeah, he already, because when I had my second baby, I was working with midwives,
Mhm,
and I fired them around 20 weeks because it was awful. Like I would never recommend any woman going to a medical midwife for the reasons of them wanting to control every single aspect and like pushing so much fear on a mother, especially when she's so vulnerable and like in this like raw state of like like newness, especially like being in pregnancy. So yeah, I fired them. So like I kind of had like a free birth vibe for the last like 20 weeks, and like almost like a wild pregnancy, and like I experienced a free birth. I just had a doula who was a good friend of mine at my birth. So he like already had like that foundation of like, we don't need an OB or we don't need a medicalized like midwife or a nurse midwife. So I feel like he was already like had that like little
mhm,
bit of like a foundation, and was like, okay, like I can see it. Even though like when I told him I don't want to do, I don't want to have anybody for my pregnancy, I don't want to have anybody at my birth, it like made him feel a little uncomfortable. But
mhm.
I knew deep down that like on a soul level, it was what he knew, what was the best.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah,
though like,
it didn't take him long to shift, but it was like a bit
yeah,
of a shock for the mind at first
yeah,
to be like, wait, no one looks like at all, like
yeah,
no one does an ultrasound, you know?
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
But it was very interesting to see like the fears coming up for him of like,
Mhm.
well, what if there's something wrong? What if like you need to like do a certain test, or what if like you need to like see if baby's okay, or like all of these like different fears, which was very beautiful to witness, because like it was also mirroring fears that I had for myself, and like breaking down that conditioning of like not needing to like micromanage pregnancy, and like always testing and checking and observing and watching, and like all these like conditionings that we've grown up with, and like what has been normalized for pregnancy and what's been normalized for birth. So yeah, it was really beautiful to like have him mirror that for me, so I could break down those patterns of conditioning that like,
Mm.
the collective is experienced.
It's like that saying that when you learn something for yourself, that's like the first level, but then when you're teaching someone else, you get to master it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but it was honestly, it was never if I look like if I saw myself like 7 years, so 8 years ago, my son is 7 now. If I like
Mhm.
fast forward from that point and like watch what I was doing now, I'd be like, this bitch is crazy. Like, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with her? What is she doing? Because like I was so deeply indoctrinated with my first pregnancy that I just completely surrendered my power to the
Mhm.
experts, quote unquote experts.
Yeah, can you
Um,
talk a bit about the care that you had for your first pregnancy and how that birth went?
yeah. So with my first pregnancy, I was, how old was I? I think I was like 21, 22, maybe, yeah, around that age, 22, I think. And I was just like starting to like skim the surface of like healing, like doing like the
Mhm.
inner healing. And with my first pregnancy, I was very much reliant on the system. I completely surrendered my power. I was like, you know what? These people are the experts. The OBs are the experts. I never knew anything about midwifery at this point of time, but I really relied on the OBs. I did all the testing that they wanted me to do, drank that gross like
Mhm.
orange drink, like oh, all of
Mhm.
all of that stuff. And I was like, I just wanted somebody else to make the decisions for me. I wanted my power to like be in somebody else's hands. I wanted them to do all the work. I wanted them to make all the decisions because in my mind, they were the experts. They knew what was best for my body, what was best for my baby. They went to school, they had all the training,
Mhm.
they knew they quote unquote knew what was the right thing to do and what was the right thing for birth and for pregnancy.
Yeah, well, I
And
will also say that like for a young woman, um, yes, you're giving perhaps your power away, but also like they're very glad to take it.
absolutely.
Like there's a huge responsibility on them, and they very gladly and easily kind of take the power from anyone who doesn't know. So if you don't know about any other options and you don't know to like listen to any gut instincts, they're just going to rack it up for
Absolutely.
themselves, and like it's something I would love to see. Like if there could be any subtle change in allopathic medicine, it could be value the mother's intuition. And
Hmm.
so like at any appointment it would be like, well, how are you feeling? Like what does your intuition say? What dreams did you have? Like if they could even ask those questions and
Yeah.
help the woman take some of her power, give it back, be like, hey, you're giving me all of this and I don't want it, so I can guide you into taking it back. Like
Yeah.
imagine how beautiful that would be. I mean, I know that would kind of then break down a lot of what their purpose is, but
Yes. And they probably
yeah,
lose
it's
a
just
ton of money
yeah,
in the process of that. They probably lose a ton of
yeah,
money.
yeah. Because it's so easy to say like I gave it all away, but it's also being taken,
Hmm.
by people who have, more experience and more wisdom. Like they're gladly just reaping it up
Hmm.
from people.
And I feel like those are the type of women that they really like thrive on because they're like, okay, like
Mm,
we can literally do any intervention, we can do anything, everything is in our hands. We have the control. If we want to like put this woman into like into surgery and have like a C-section because we have to go on vacation in a couple days and we want to get this over and done with, like the power is literally all in their hands. Like and
mhm,
yeah, those I feel like those are the type of women that they really like they enjoy to work with because they can do whatever they want.
mhm.
Yeah, so I remember my my water broke at like 36 weeks. And I took myself to the hospital because like, okay, I guess this is time to give birth. Like, let me go. So they told me I could only eat something like before like they induced me further. And I remember just eating like a little piece of bagel and I was just like, you know what, I'm not even hungry. Just like I'll just eat this just because I need to eat. And then I remember them I didn't really know that they were inducing me. I just thought that they were giving me like an IV to like I didn't even know what the heck they were doing. I just like was like, okay, you guys know what you're doing. Just go ahead and do it.
Mhm.
And like as time went on, like the contractions and the surges started to like really come, and like they were starting to feel really, really uncomfortable. Like I remember being in such excruciating pain that I wanted to escape my body. Like I wanted to crawl out of my body and just like be gone.
Hmm.
And that was the time that I was like, okay, like I want an epidural. Like, give me the epidural. And I remember having a friend saying, no, Marissa, you don't need the epidural. Like, you work out, you know, you can handle this kind of like pain. And I was like, what is this girl talking about? Like, this is nothing like working out. Like, what is and it was funny because she also had
That
already
was
given birth.
before your birth?
This is while I was in labor.
She was with you in
Yeah, she came in to
okay.
say hi, like, "How are you doing?" And then she's like, "Oh, you don't need the epidural, like, you know, you got this, like, you work out, so you can handle this." And she also had a baby not that long ago too, and I was like, "Does she even know what she's talking?"
All right.
But I remember, like, getting the epidural and, like, they gave me, like, this little button to, like, press whenever I felt, like, any type of, like, discomfort. So I remember just constantly, like, pressing it, pressing it, pressing it, like, just
Wow.
numbing, like, I didn't wanna feel anything. And I remember it was around 2 o'clock in the morning. So at this time, like I've been in the hospital since 10 a.m. in the morning, and now it's like 2 a.m. the following day. And I remember like everybody, like all these like nurses and doctors and all this like support staff coming in and saying, okay, like you need to give birth to your baby now. If you don't
Right.
birth your baby in 2 hours, we're gonna have to give you a C-section. And that scared the crap out of me because I was like, I do not want to be cut open. Like I do not want to be cut open. Like this does like no, there's no way. So I remember being so numb that I couldn't even feel the contractions coming to even let my body push the baby out. I was
Mm.
so completely numb. And the nurse that was beside me, she was watching, I guess, the
Yeah.
monitor of like when the contractions would happen. She's like, okay, push now. But I couldn't feel anything to push. I could not feel anything. The only thing that I remember feeling was the fetal ejection reflex. Like I could feel him like come out.
Mm.
And they cut him right away. And he started to lose consciousness. He started to lose consciousness, and they had to rush him into the NICU. And he was also 36 weeks, so he was considered a premature baby. And yeah, like after he was like scooped away from me, my husband went with him into the NICU, and they were like, he was like watching him, and I was just laying there, and I'm like, what the hell just happened to me? Like I felt so traumatized. Like I was in like
Mm.
such a state of shock that I was like, like, what just occurred in my life right now? Like, did I literally just give birth? And I was in such shock. And I remember my grandmother being in the corner. She came in after Liam was born, and she's like, what's wrong with Marissa? Why is she like that? And like, I was just like, I couldn't even talk because I was just like, I was in such a state of shock.
Well,
And
you're
I
also
remember,
under the effects of all the drugs
yes,
from the epidural, right?
yes,
Like you're drugged up, consciously, like so
hmm
that's even hard. Like
yeah,
I don't drink alcohol very much, but like if I have a glass, like my mind is already, not
yeah,
working normally. And like that is like a whole other level of narcotics that you have in your body.
absolutely.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, so I
Mhm.
remember them putting me in a wheelchair and like wheeling me through the NICU because at this point I haven't even seen Liam. I haven't seen what he looked like. I have no idea what he looks like. I haven't
Mm.
seen like I haven't touched him. I don't even like he was a stranger to me. And they wheeled me like my best friend was witnessed my birth and she stayed with me the whole time. So did my husband. And they wheeled me into the NICU to see him. And she's like, there he is, Marissa. And she's like, touch him. I'm like, I don't want to touch him. I don't wanna touch him, I don't like I'm like, "No." I'm like, "Just take me to my room." I like, this no. And I
Was he
remember
also
going
like hooked up with feeding tubes and or things like
no, he didn't have a feeding tube, he just had a lot of IVs in him.
right?
He had
Yeah.
a lot of IVs, and then he was in this, like it was like those little, like, bassinets, but it was like the incubator bassinets.
Yeah. And why did you
So,
feel like you didn't want to touch him? Was it more like you were still in a state of shock that you hadn't arrived to like be present, or was it that you didn't you felt he was fragile and you didn't want to like hurt him? I'm
it was
just
more
curious.
It was more of like this state of shock. And I
Yeah.
was very disconnected during my entire pregnancy. Like I don't really remember singing to him or like trying to connect with him. Like I was very,
Mm.
very, very disconnected. I was also very upset with like the way my body was changing and I couldn't accept that.
Mm.
So I continued to stay disconnected from that entire experience. So yeah, when he came out, it was just like this state of shock and this also like I don't wanna say repulsion, but just, like, I didn't wanna connect with him,
I
and
think
I
it's
remember him,
really
like
interesting, and I just love that you're mentioning that because I don't think you're the first mother who has felt
yeah,
that. Sometimes women expect to give birth and be like, "Oh my God, I love my baby," and
mhm,
when we give birth physiologically with our natural hormones flowing through us, like we're made to have those feelings, that like huge surge of oxytocin right when the baby's born, and we just want to hug like
mhm,
every little creature, everything
yeah,
that's around us in that moment. And so if you mess with that system and you don't have those hormones flowing through you, yeah, there could not be that natural urge. And so, and that can be really hard for women, yeah, to
yeah,
experience in the first, moments of birth, right after birth, and even the first few weeks after birth.
absolutely, and I will also wonder if, like, that the Pitocin, which is, like, the synthetic oxytocin that they give you,
Yes.
that also, like, overrides your own oxytocin production, so that could also play a huge role in, like, not being able to have that connection with baby.
I have heard that. That
Yeah,
yeah, I've heard of a few birth workers talk about that. Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after like I went through the NICU and I passed him and they brought me to my room and I had no idea about breastfeeding. Like I knew I wanted to breastfeed because I knew that there was such important benefits to nourishing your baby with breast milk, but I assumed my whole pregnancy that just because it was natural, it was supposed to be easy.
Mm.
And I think it must have been like 24 hours after my birth, maybe a little bit less than 24 hours, maybe 12 hours after my birth was when like they're like, "Do you want to breastfeed your baby?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, of course I do. Like, why not?" And at this point, I didn't know that they already have given him formula in the
Uh,
NICU. Like they've already given him formula, and I didn't have any clue. I had no freaking clue what I was doing with breastfeeding. The nurses in the NICU, like they offered me like barely any help. And yeah, so he was in there for a couple days and we were able to bring him out, take him home. We took him home one night, but he had jaundice. So we had to bring him back a day later, which it was so awful having to see him like in this machine with these like glasses on, this
mm,
blue light on him. And I can't remember if it was before or after. I feel like it was before or after that. I went to go see a lactation consultant in the hospital. And he was already being fed formula. We were already giving him like the Infamil, like hot gar hot garbage. And I felt really like upset about that because I was like, I really wanted to breastfeed him. I didn't want to have to give him formula. And yeah, I saw the lactation consultant in the hospital and they told me that I'm starving my baby and just to start giving him formula. Like basically give up breastfeeding, you're starving him. And as a mother, I'm like, I don't want to starve my baby. Like,
mm.
of course I'm gonna give him formula. Hi Damien, come, you wanna come? Damien just woke up from a nap, so he's a little disgruntled. You want a hug? Okay. Yeah, so like like the last thing that I wanted to do was like, starve my baby. So I was like, screw this. Like I'm not gonna breastfeed. I'm gonna just give him formula. And from there, like that's where like the ripple of like disaster happened of like digestive issues, colic,
Mm.
reflux, constipation, diarrhea. It was just a nightmare for the first like 3, 4 months. Come. Okay. It was a nightmare for the first 3, 4 months. Like we were trying formula after formula and like nothing seemed to happen, like seemed to help him. Some formula made him a little bit better, then a couple days later it made him worse. And then some days or some formulas just like made it completely worse altogether. Remember Emily?
Remember, I came to see you once. You just woke up from a nap, Damien. That's all right.
Don't throw me away, Damien. So yeah, then my husband heard about goat's milk formula. So we started giving
Mm.
him goat's milk formula and it was like he was a new baby, and it was amazing to experience because all of like these digestive issues started to go away, and he was actually like starting to become more calm. So that was kind of like the inspiration of why I wanted to go back to school and understand nutrition and holistic nutrition, and like with the focus of like infant digestion, because I knew that there was other babies out there. Like I knew that I wasn't the only mother who had a baby that was experiencing these digestive issues. So that was like my passion of like why I wanted to go back to school and really like support moms. So I started doing that after Liam turned 1.
And so the
I
breastfeeding, so did you just like dry up your milk? You didn't nurse him in the end at all? No one helped
no,
you?
no.
Because that
I
could
tried
have
to
been, yeah,
I tried
that,
to pump, and like I had
yeah.
no idea what I was doing, and I didn't really know where to go or who to ask. And I figured that the lactation consultants at the hospital would support me because that's what their job is right? Lactation consulting. And when they told me that I was starving him and just to like give up breastfeeding, I was like, okay, you're the expert. You're telling me, okay, like I'm not going to starve my baby. I'd rather
Yeah.
him, fed is best is their slogan to promote formula feeding.
Hmm.
So yeah,
And
it was a
depending
really
on the
hard journey.
hospital and like the practitioner that you meet, like it's likely still the same now,
Yeah.
7 years later. Like it probably hasn't changed very much. And it's been the same story for like for the past 100 years, really, when formula was first invented,
Yeah.
which did, save and help many babies who would have died otherwise. But it just confused people, and there's like no support for breastfeeding, which is why
Mhm.
the Leche League was created like in the 60s, for moms to get together and support each other in nursing. Yeah, so if you don't know, you don't know. And there's still so many
Absolutely.
women like in those pockets where they just don't know. They
Yeah.
haven't been around it, they don't have the right resources. Uh yeah, and until it's like almost like an inner thing to think, well, maybe these experts are wrong
Mhm.
and I'm going to go look it up, until you have that in you. And once you have it in you, it breaks
Yeah.
open your whole world and your whole foundation of everything.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be 100% wrong, but even if they're like, maybe they're a little bit wrong and I should do more research, just to even have that questioning, yeah,
Mhm.
it shatters like our understanding of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like one of the biggest things I also remember during that birth experience was I never saw my OB the whole time until like it was time to like push baby out. That was the
Wow.
only time like she showed up, and yeah, it was like she came in, she pulled the baby out, and then she disappeared, and then I didn't see her until like a couple hours after, her asking me like how are you feeling. And it was such like a non-intimate experience. Like it was just I felt like another number.
Yeah,
I
for
felt another
sure.
number. Yeah. So yeah, that was, and it took me a long time to move through that experience because I held so much trauma in my body and so much grief and so much sadness of like the
Mhm.
whole entire experience. And for a couple of years after, I did a lot of like, for a couple of years after, I had to do a lot of like somatic healing. Hold on, just let me grab Damien.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to do a lot of somatic healing after that journey because I felt like such a bad mother. Like I felt like the worst mother ever. And yeah, one of the things that like came through my somatic journeys was like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that was like the biggest lesson and awareness for me because yeah, it was a really hard time. Like I felt like my body failed me because I couldn't breastfeed. I felt like I failed him because I couldn't breastfeed, and then he had all these um digestive experiences. So It was, yeah, I remember being really depressed after that. Like I felt so depressed. I felt so alone. And I was like one of the only girls in like my group that had a baby. So nobody else,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't talk to anybody else. I didn't know who else to talk to. So yeah, it was a very hard journey. You want applesauce? Okay. It was a very hard journey, but I'm honestly so grateful that I went through it because
Mm-hmm.
it really showed me the times of like when I gave my power away and what it felt like to give my power away and what it felt like to like reclaim my power after all of that journey. And like it built this foundation of like I know what I want and I know what I don't want and I know what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And I'm so grateful that I Spider-Man's finger. Oh my gosh. I'm really grateful that I went through that entire journey because I knew like now looking back at it, like I know on a soul level that I needed to experience that. So I know what it's like to reclaim my power and reclaim my voice and stand in my own power and set boundaries of like, no, this is not what I'm like this is not what I'm having. This is not what I'm doing because this doesn't feel right to me. So yeah, it was like it feels good to like look back and be like, yeah, I did go through all that crap, but like I'm happy that I played exactly the way it wanted to come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can take a minute to give him a snack.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
let's
no,
come.
no worries. Yeah, no
Okay.
worries.
Get some applesauce. Are you gonna feed yourself or do you want me to feed you? Okay, I'll feed you. Okay. So you like my earrings? They're clear quartz earrings. Yeah, they're crystal earrings. And after you're gonna go watch Liam. Okay, you tell Liam after you want to play the game with him. Okay. Okay. Okay, sit down, sit here. You want to sit there? Okay, cool.
There you go.
Yeah. Hungry belly. He fell asleep before his lunch. He hasn't been napping. Then recently he started wanting to nap again. So I'm like,
Mm,
all right, maybe I'll get you and the baby on a rhythm of sleeping at the same
mm.
time.
Oh my God, you can dream.
Yeah, I know.
That's like the hardest when yeah, I had that with my first two. Uh,
No, there is no milk. You're right. He's been we've been weaning off of boob. So
Mm-hmm.
now he understands that there's no more milk.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
when the baby comes, there's going to be more milk. And I told him the milk's going to be for baby. So
Yeah.
yeah, milk's going to be for the baby.
Milk for baby.
You're happy? Okay, good.
Because you're a big brother.
You what? Baby comes. Yeah, baby comes. You're going to be happy when the baby comes? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're going to be a big brother?
No.
You're going to what? You're going to shake the baby's hands? Okay.
Is the baby going to have big, big hands or teeny tiny little hands?
Two hands. Two hands.
Two, yes. That's right.
You're funny. Here. So yeah, back to our conversation. um, when I got pregnant with Damien, no sucker. No sucker. When I
And how
got pregnant,
long after your first was that? What did you get pregnant with Damien?
so they're 5 years apart.
Okay, so about
And
4 years, yeah.
yeah. So I was doing. Who has no teeth? You? Why do you have no teeth?
Take my teeth.
Thanos took your teeth. Jeez. So yeah, it was 4 years after I had Liam, and during that time I did a lot of like somatic work. Oh
My baby.
no!
She has her baby. Can you change his diaper maybe? I just changed it. Oh, okay, great.
You guys are like the same age. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Damien's about a year older.
A year older? Yeah, Damien's like
Yeah.
2 and a bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, okay. He's 18 months. So
Yeah.
yeah, not too far.
No.
Yeah, I'm always curious, especially after like a first traumatic birth, how it is to get pregnant again. What do even the conversations with like your partner, like how was it for him to view the birth from his perspective, that first birth?
You know what? That's a really good question. I think like I never really actually had that conversation with him, to be honest with you. I know that he was really like distraught when he started to see Liam losing consciousness. Like that really
Mhm.
scared him a lot. And like having to see him with all these like IVs in him, and yeah, that was like the gist of like the conversation. What? No more milk, baby. Yeah. That was like the gist of like the conversation of like him just having a really hard time processing that. And I honestly, I don't think he's really like processed that whole experience too, because it was all very, I guess, traumatic too on both ends. Like him watching me, like I remember him saying like I had such a hard time watching you being in so much pain. Like it really like bothered him. I have no more head. It really bothered him watching me be in that much pain, and he couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like
and
that was
then when you were like kind of depressed after and processing the birth, like that's also hard for the men to
yeah.
see and witness. Like I had a bit of that after my first birth, not from birth trauma, just more from like exhaustion and being alone and
Mhm.
other things from like before my pregnancy, like that were coming up for me. And when I was thinking about a second baby, I was, a bit worried, like, well, what if I get depressed again? What if, it was kind of scary to try again? And I just thought like, no, this time it's going to be different. It's going to be joyous. And I just decided that.
Yeah,
But there was definitely some navigating to do of facing that fear of, am I bringing myself back into that same dark hole?
yeah. It was a hard time, especially like feeling that depression, because I honestly didn't even talk to my husband about it. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really know how to like communicate that with him. And it came what like the way it was communicated was like I really distanced myself from Liam during like that first year. Like I really like distanced myself. I was also like trying to figure out who the heck I was after giving birth, and like all my friends still, doing their own thing, going out and partying
Mm-hmm.
and not having kids and not having this responsibility of like having this baby. So that kind of like that played a role in like how I communicated what I was feeling, just like being completely separated. And like he did a lot of the work. Like he did most of the work with Liam. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was it was very hard to tell him like how I felt, because I didn't really know how I was feeling. I really didn't know how to express that or tell him that. And I felt very like separated from him too. Like I felt very disconnected from him.
Yeah, it's like in hindsight, it's easy to talk about and put into words. Like once you're out of it, you're like, oh, that's what I was feeling.
Yeah.
And when you're in it, if you haven't been exposed to people who put words to these kind of feelings and experiences, it can be really hard to put words to them, which
Yeah.
is part of why we want to be talking about this, so that, if anyone is resonating, that they might have words to put into their own experiences
Mhm.
and understand them better.
Yeah. And yeah, I completely agree with that. Like looking back now, like I could have easily like said like, "Hey, babe, like I'm having a really hard time. Like
Mhm.
I having a hard time processing the birth, and I really don't know how I feel, but I know that I don't really feel like myself, and I'm trying to figure out who I am, and I really don't know who that person is anymore." So I was really trying hard to be the same Marissa that I was before I gave birth and before I got pregnant. And I didn't know how to get to her. I didn't know how to access her. I didn't know how to find her again.
And she's gone.
Yeah. And that was
Yeah.
something that was really hard to like to comprehend and like, yeah. More applesauce. Here, you have another bite here, dude. Yeah. So looking back now, like I can really like express, like I can easily express what I wanted to say. But when I was in that deep space of like, what the heck is happening to me? I had no clue what to say. I had no idea. Yeah. So when I got pregnant with Damien, before I got pregnant with Damien, I started to do a lot of like somatic work and healing. And I started to tap into like the shadow work and understanding the shadow and the subconscious and the unconscious programming. And I also did a lot of like research and like just really nourishing my brain with like understanding every aspect of pregnancy, understand every aspect of birth and postpartum. And that's kind of like where I wanted to pivot my own like business, was like focusing on preparing moms for postpartum and preparing them for breastfeeding and helping them understand like how to breastfeed and what resources they needed to have before they even gave birth to support their breastfeeding journey, and how to take care of themselves and nourish themselves after postpartum. This was something that I started to really focus on, and I started to put like the pieces together during my pregnancy with Damien. But when my husband and I started talking about like having another baby, it was actually really interesting because I remember like the night we conceived him, like I could feel Damien's like energy like enter my womb. Like I remember like laying in Liam's room and like I could feel him like coming down into my womb after we conceived him. It was actually a very like cool experience. And yeah, like I just remember like just feeling him come down.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So I got pregnant with Damien, and I was just doing like all this like research on pregnancy and birth and postpartum. And I was creating a course for preparing moms. More applesauce. Holy moly. Here, go tell Liam to get you applesauce in the fridge. And so I started to work with midwives. I really wanted to have like more of a natural, holistic pregnancy. And I assumed that midwives were, the holistic option. So I got in with the midwife, and this was right during COVID. So it was like, it was chaos at that time. And I remember like going into my first appointment, and I was not the type of person that would wear a mask, because that's just not my thing. Like no, thank you. Like, people that want to do it, that's your choice. That's your, that's your choice. But that was not the choice that I wanted to make for myself and my body. So I remember going into my first appointment, and this was
Would
like,
you have worn a mask, just quickly, would you have worn a mask before giving birth to Liam, before your first birth?
absolutely. Absolutely. If they told me you need to wear a mask, put it on, I would put it on. But you know what? I also wonder, because like I knew that I didn't want to vaccinate Liam. I knew that was something that we didn't want to do. So I don't know. Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. That's an interesting question.
It just goes to show, I think, like after a birth like that, where you've been so traumatized and not respected and violated, there's like such a power and like such a big boundary that's like, no, like I decide what happens to my body. It is like so strong and innate and like furious, almost like it's just so wild and primal. And I think some people don't understand that if you haven't had an experience that like violates you so much. Because I was also pregnant during COVID and masking times, and I wore the mask maybe 2 or 3 times, and then in like that January of 2020, I was like, I cannot. Like 2020 is coming. I'm having a baby. I can't breathe with it on. Like I already have like so much happening in my body and breathing. Like I will not wear this thing. And it was so primal that I don't think many people really understand if you haven't had like an experience. that
Yeah.
makes you do that.
Yeah, I remember like going into that. Okay, give me a minute, okay? I'll give it for you. I remember going into that appointment and like for the first 45 minutes, she didn't even notice that I didn't have a mask on. And it was only when she got close to me to take my blood, she's like, I just realized you're not wearing a mask. And I'm like, oh, Damien, dude, why are you so mad? I'm going to get it for you. Hold on. Let me get him the applesauce before he like
Yeah.
turns the whole place upside down. Come on. Come on. No.
I was just thinking, because I don't think I'm going to be editing this. I think it's just like, it's pretty raw. This is
Yeah.
motherhood. Like
Yes.
sometimes this is why, like, it's actually hard to get these stories or to hear this
Mm-hmm.
information because moms are so freaking busy once the
Yep.
babies arrive. Like,
Yep.
well, sometimes it's really hard to take time to even process and heal from the trauma, one. And then it takes extra energy to decide, I'm going to talk about this with my community, despite being super busy with the kids and them having needs. But I think it helps us personally to share a story. And also it can help so many people just by having these stories out there. So
Yeah.
that's part of this rawness. We have our kids with us. It's a bit of
Yeah.
a mess. And we're still doing the work,
Absolutely.
within the circus.
Yeah. 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 I love that. I love that it's going to be unedited because, like, yeah, this is like the reality of motherhood. Like, Damien woke up
Mhm.
from a nap. He's in a sour mood. He's flipping the tripod because I'm not moving fast enough to get him an applesauce. It is what it is. You're breastfeeding. Like, it's the realness of what motherhood is. Like, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I literally would not change it for the world. And I always like wanted to like kind of separate my business and like
Mm.
yeah, my business and like my mothering, but like it can't. Like it's just they go hand in hand. You're not done, okay. Okay, no, I'm not done yet. Soon. Soon. Okay? Thanks. Oops. Oh my goodness. So yeah, let me come back to where I was about the midwifery
Mhm.
experience. So yeah, it was during COVID and like she gave me such a hard time with not wearing a mask. Like she's like, I told her that I have anxiety and I don't want to cover my mouth. Like I don't want to do that. And she's like, well, anxiety is not a medical condition. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it is because people are given antidepressants and different type of medication to deal with anxiety. So I'm pretty sure it is a medical condition. And from there, like it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. And it was a team of 3 midwives. They're here in Canada and Ontario. They're nurse practitioner midwives for those who are not in Canada. And it is very medicalized. Like I would put them in the same category as OBGYNs when it comes to
Mhm.
birth and pregnancy. And yeah, just because like they support home birth doesn't mean that they are more natural. Doesn't mean that they're
Yeah,
more
they
holistic.
support home birth. And there are like handfuls of great midwives within the system. There are some, and if you got one, you got lucky. And I
Yeah.
talk about that on my podcast with Desley, who it's on my YouTube channel. That she was in Toronto. She had a really amazing midwife, and I've met her too. And I've heard of other gems, but as the system gets worse, it's harder for them to even work in the system. So
Yeah.
they're leaving. A
Yeah.
lot of them have already left.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in general, it is extremely medicalized. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember like I went to go do it was like my first my first ultrasound appointment, and I went in. No, sorry, it was my second one. It was the one where they tell you the gender of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And I only taught, so yeah, it was a team of 3 midwives I had. I met one, I met a second one, and I really liked her. Like, she was like one of the original like midwives in Ontario, and I really liked her. Like, she was a little bit more like, I'm gonna say quote unquote crunchier than the other midwives that I had. Like, she was more like, in tune with like the truth of physiological birth. So I really liked her, but she no longer supported births at home. Like, she was no longer facilitating them. She's kind of like, I've passed that torch on to the newer midwives, and I'm not doing that anymore. And I was like, I would literally
What?
give you money to come to my birth just to be there because I prefer you. Like, I connected with her really well. But she's like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And I was like, okay, it is what it is. So I was so upset about that. And then I had a third midwife, which I've never met her before. I only spoke to her once on the phone. And that was right after I had my ultrasound appointment with the second ultrasound appointment. And it took almost an hour and 45 minutes during this ultrasound appointment to like get the proper, like, I guess, measurements and all this stuff that they needed to get during the ultrasound appointments of the baby, because he was just like not cooperating. He just did not want anything to do with it. And even before like I got into the appointment, I remember her giving me such a hard time. She's like, where's your mask? You need to cover your mouth. You need to sanitize your hands. And I'm like, I am not doing any of that. She's like, well, then we're not taking you in. And I was like, well, I really want to know what my baby is. Like, I really want to know. So like, I just put a scarf over my mouth, and like, that was it, just a scarf. And I told her, I'm not putting sanitizer on my hands. I'm going to go wash my hands, because that is more, that's better than putting sanitizer on your hands, actually having washed hands with soap instead of, chemicals. I don't want to put that garbage on my hands. I told her, like, I'm allergic to sanitizer. I'm allergic to the alcohol in here. I'm not putting that on my hands. So she was already giving me a hard time before I even got on to the ultrasound table to do the ultrasound. So 2 hours later, the appointment's done. I go home, and a couple hours later, I call my midwife, because this is what I did with my OB. She was like, call your, like, when I was pregnant with Liam, she's like, call the OB office and they'll tell you what the gender of your baby is. So I assumed that, okay, this is what the midwives do as well. So I called, the secretary's like, oh, your midwife, she's busy right now. She'll call you when she can. She didn't call me till 2 days later, and I've never met her. This was the first time that I've spoken to this midwife on the phone, and she's like, look, like, we can't call every patient. We're very busy. We have a lot of patients, and you're not the only patient that we have. So we can't call every single person and tell them what their baby's gender is. She's like, the only reason why I'm calling you is because I wanted to let you know that there were some findings on your ultrasound, and according to the ultrasound, your baby has issues with their spine, and they're most likely going to have spina bifida.
Wow.
You're most likely going to have a early birth. We're gonna have to like send you to the hospital, birth your baby there early, do surgery. Your baby's most likely never going to be able to walk. And at this point, like, I was like bawling my eyes out, because like I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is awful. Like, I cannot believe this is happening. Hold on. What's wrong? Why are you upset? I thought you ate it. Did you eat it?
No.
Are you lying to me?
No, I swear to God, I didn't eat it up. But you know he's gonna say problem. Or in
Did you eat his applesauce, Liam?
No.
If you wanted another applesauce, I can give you another applesauce.
Me?
Yeah.
I got.
Okay. You took Damien. Is that where you got it?
No. I climbed, Mom. I can climb things.
Okay. So, what do you want?
More applesauce.
Where is your applesauce?
There's still some in his thing.
Can you help him get it?
Come
Liam's gonna help you scoop it out.
on.
No? Okay. All right. Whatever. So yeah, she's telling me all this horrible information, and my husband went for a walk at this point and came home after I got off the phone with her, and she said that she's going, so go get more then. Okay. Okay. So she she said that they're going to send me for further testing at a hospital downtown Toronto where they're more professional there and they have better technology, better ultrasound equipment. So she's going to call me back and give me an appointment date.
Did
So
she
my
give you the
husband,
gender of the baby?
she did tell me, she told me it was a boy at the very
Yeah.
end of it. And I was like, well, what a great conversation. And I just remember being like so distraught. I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't breathe. And then my husband walked in and he's like, what's wrong? So I told him everything that happened. And he's like, okay, relax. Like, they look like cookies. He told me, relax, everything's gonna be okay. And then like I had this feeling of like, I need to go for a walk. And I was like, that's all I could think about was like, there's something wrong with my baby's spine. Like, he's never going to be able to walk. The last thing I want to do is like birth at a hospital again after that, a traumatic experience. And I just went for this walk. And as I was walking, like, I didn't know where I was walking to. I was just like, just walking. And I had this feeling of like going down the street. Like, something told me to go down the street. And on my mind, like this is all I was thinking about, like this whole entire conversation, replaying it over and over in my mind. And I look over and I see this big ladybug, and ladybugs are very important to me because this is my like the energy of my mom. My mom passed away in 2012, so she used to call me her little ladybug when I was a baby because I was so small.
Wow.
So that ladybug. So when I saw this ladybug, I was like, oh my God, she's telling me that everything's okay, just to calm down, everything's okay. So I had this like beautiful stillness of like, okay, everything's okay. Like, I'm gonna be okay. The baby's gonna be okay. Like, this is like, just breathe. And when I came back home, my husband's like, Marissa, everything's gonna be okay. You know that, right? And I was like, yeah, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know that. So I eventually went for that appointment. They brought me in and she told me, she did the ultrasound. She's like, I don't know what the other ultrasound clinic is talking about. She's like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your baby's spine. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, why did they put me through all of this stress to just for no reason? And I left that appointment and I called the midwives and I was like, look, and I remember like speaking to her and I was so afraid to speak and like tell her that I was going to fire her because I already knew after that experience that I didn't want to work with them because I knew that I could not have somebody like that in my birth space, witnessing my birth in such an intimate place. And I didn't know who she was. She had this like horrible conversation to meet with me. And I just knew that she would like, if she was in my birth space, I would probably be transferred to the hospital and end up having a C-section because I would be so like closed off and I'd be so afraid just to like have her energy in the room. And I remember calling her and my voice was just shaking and just shaking and shaking. And I had such a hard time having this conversation with her, but all I could hear was like, speak even if your voice is shaking. Keep speaking even if your voice is shaking. So I told her, I'm like, look, like, I don't want you in my birth space. I don't think that you're a good midwife. I'm like, you're not very compassionate. I don't think you know how to do your job. I'm like, you are giving me all this information. I have no clue who you are. I've never even met you. So why would I have you in my birth? I'm like, I want nothing to do with you. You're fired. And that was like, I think around the 20-week mark. And then after that, I was like, you know what? That's it. I'm just going to free birth my baby. I seen the word free birth a couple weeks prior to that. And there's something that like hung on, like that word, like really, really resonated with me. I was like, oh, free birth, like what is that? So I started to like look into it, and then I started following Yolanda Norris Clark, and then I started like listening to like the Free Birth Society podcast, and I was like, this is what I need to do. Like this is what is being called forward of me, is like having a free birth and being in my own space and being with just like my family and in like this intimate setting of like trusting my body. And at this point, this is when I started to do some more like somatic work, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to free birth, I really, really, really want to work through things that were going to block me from like surrendering into the birth. So a lot of things were coming up with like in my somatic practices was like being afraid to surrender. And then like through that, like I was really able to like trust my body and know that my body's capable of like birthing my baby with
And when
nobody
you
there.
talk
Like,
about somatic practice, like what were you doing? Just to give
so
more details to people.
yeah, so one of the things that like I first learned with somatic practice and somatic healing was through my sister-in-law, and she works with this woman who does something called the Dalian method. So the Dalian method takes you through different places in your body, and you verbalize what is in those places. So you verbalize and you breathe
Yeah.
out, and like you breathe out like you're fogging up a mirror. So like whatever you're feeling, you verbalize it and breathe, verbalize it and breathe, and you let the energy move through.
Yeah.
And this was like my first experience of like any type of like shadow work, somatic work. And I worked through a lot of like trauma that I had with Liam. So I wanted to use this practice for Damien and Damien's birth and my pregnancy with Damien. And yeah, a lot of it was like being afraid to trust my body, and like through those, like letting those emotions come out and letting those emotions be felt, I started to create this like bigger awareness of like, my body is capable of birthing my baby. Like my body is designed and created to birth my baby. And all these like doubts and fears that I have of like, my body's not safe or my body can't do it, was like all these like deep levels of conditioning and like past life trauma of like trusting the system and like something happening, and like all of these things were coming up for me. So I was like, oh, I can do this. Like I can do this. Like I know my body, I know my baby is designed and meant to do this. So this was like my energy going into my birth with Damien. And the birth
So
with
when you
Damien
called the
was,
midwives, just
yeah,
before, when you called the midwives to fire them, did you fire all of them
all
or
of
just
them.
that one? You were like, just, it was like all of you as a group, you have not
Yeah,
treated me well, you're not doing your work well, and I'm leaving.
yeah.
And did they let you leave easily? Like, did they ask? I know some people, it's like, well, where are we sending your papers? Or they kind of follow up? Did they just kind of let you go?
They let me go, and then the secretary called me and to ask me to let her know where to send the papers. And I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll get back to you. And then after that, like I never contacted her. She never contacted me. So I was like,
Nice.
see you later.
Yeah.
But I wanted to side note something too about the whole spine thing with Damien and like in the ultrasound. My
Mhm.
husband was telling me, and I didn't even know this, like months later after I had him, he goes, you know, every day, he goes, I would go and visualize myself going into his spine and closing up his back and closing up his spine. He's like, every night I would go and I would visualize myself actually physically closing up that space. And then when he was born, Damien has like this little birthmark in his lower back there. Yeah.
Oh my God, I have shivers. I want to
Yeah.
cry. He
Yeah.
didn't even tell you he was doing that work. He
No.
just told you. Our men can be so like
Yeah.
psychic sometimes, eh? It's
Yeah.
like wild.
Yeah.
Aw, you have a healer man. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. He has pretty good intuition. When like he tells me something, I'm like, I always like want to like push it off. I'm like, no, you're not right. But like every time he tells me something and he's like, no, Marissa, like I know this. And I'm like, no, you
Yeah.
don't. And then like it happens and I'm like, "Ugh." So I just let him take the lead when he wants to take the lead because I'm like, you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
But I did have a doula at my birth. She was a good friend of mine, and we were friends like way before I got pregnant with Damien. But when I met her, I knew that I wanted her at my second birth. Like I knew I wanted her there. So she was there. She facilitated the whole birth. She supported me. She took care of me, and yeah,
Mm,
she was amazing. She was so amazing. And the birth that I had with Damien was just so healing. Like it was like my redemption birth of like what I experienced with Liam. And it was just so healing and gave me so much power. And like really, really created a deeper foundation of like trusting and surrendering and like just knowing that I'm capable of birthing.
mm.
Yeah.
That's incredible. How was your husband? Was he on board with doing it at home like that with no medical support?
He thought I was crazy at first, but like after the entire experience, like he's like, yeah, like he's like, I couldn't believe that that's how like how easy it was.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, I couldn't believe how easy it was and
Mm,
like how gentle it was. Like it was just so
mm,
like Damien came out and like I was able to connect with him right away. Like I would like it was so perfect. It was just so magical and like Yeah, Liam, like my oldest son was there with me the whole time and he witnessed the entire birth. He didn't want to go to sleep. He wanted to stay up and like watch mommy give birth.
Wow.
And he was like, I was in the birth pool and he was like there beside me. He's like, Mom, you can do this. I believe in you. I know you can do this. Like he was like literally like cheering me on.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
huge. Yeah, because you had to work through fears of like an actual experience, in this
Mm-hmm.
lifetime, that it
Yeah.
wasn't just something in your mind.
Yeah.
There was a time when it seemed to not work. And then it is wild to witness a woman completely without interventions, without questions, without being touched and prodded and
Mm-hmm.
poked, and you're like, oh my God, it just works.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you leave it alone, it just works. And also the people that we have in our space with us is so important. It's such an
Yeah.
intimate experience. The woman is open on all levels,
Yeah.
physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And we need to have people we trust in that space so that we can open and
Mm-hmm.
surrender and let go.
Yeah, 100%. And I also had my grandmother
Yeah.
at that birth too, and she looked so terrified, but I knew that like through that birth experience that I had it at her house, because that's where I birthed Damien was in her basement. And I knew through that experience that I helped her heal her own um beliefs around like home birth and like birthing outside of the system because she was
Mhm.
so like she kept on saying, like, you're gonna birth at home. That's so dangerous. Like, why are you gonna do that? And like through that experience, I could feel like this shift in her own energy of like, wow, this actually can happen at home. And this doesn't actually need to have like some type of medical intervention. Like, you don't need to do this at a hospital. So I could feel as soon as Damien came out, like I could feel that like dissolve within her.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so having her in your space and she may have had like a little bit of fears or concern, did that affect you?
Oh, absolutely, because like she was like subtly like subconsciously sabotaging the birth because she would like I wanted it to be dark and quiet and she would like flick the lights on and be like, "Why is it so dark in here? Why is Marissa making all these noises?" And I was like, oh my gosh, just come back into my body. And thank God I had Alex's. Alex is like, can we keep this quiet here and turn the light off?
Okay,
Alex was my doula. She's like, can we keep the lights off and like keep it quiet and like just like go away basically. So I was happy that I had her to like say that because I was
perfect.
so deep in like the I was in active labor. So I was so deep into it that like the thought of like me telling my grandmother like just to like bug off, but like I couldn't because I was just so deep into this portal. So I was like, oh, thank God Alex said something to her.
Amazing. So you had like a good gatekeeper there.
Yes.
That's wow,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And then I imagine your postpartum after was like very different. The bonding with the baby was very different.
I
Um,
honestly felt like I felt like I was high after my birth. Like
mhm,
I felt like I was on cloud nine. Like I felt so good. I felt so good. I want to say for like 4 or 5 days. And
mm,
even like Alex, my doula, she was like, Marissa, I feel like I'm high. And I'm like, I know, like this is
mhm,
crazy. And then like after those couple days, because like in that time, like I was like learning how to breastfeed Damien and trying to figure that out too. And I was so grateful that like I learned what it looked like to actually have a baby like suckle and what it sounded like when they're drinking and like know that like the
mhm.
amount that they're getting will like show me in their output in their diaper and like being very in tune with that. But Damien actually had a very severe tongue tie. He was tied right to the tip and it was affecting his breastfeeding.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that was like the time when like the come down of like this high of like birth hormones started to come down and then I started to like started just like slowly like panic a little bit because I was like, oh my God, he's not having very much like diaper output and what?
Yeah, but
Eat butt.
Mhm.
in chocolate.
No, you're not having chocolate. So yeah, I took him to see a pediatric dentist and she was so amazing. Like I remember like having like all this like panic and being so vulnerable and like in this like raw postpartum period. And like she was so gentle and she was so amazing. So they actually like released his tongue tie. And I didn't want to do it like in the conventional way where like they cut it or they burned it. And I also had this feeling that he was going to have a tongue tie. Maybe it was like my intuition kicking in, or like I either manifested it, because like I kept on asking. My hair is nice, thank you. I kept on like looking it up and researching it and like asking questions about it, because I don't know, there's something that interested me about the tongue tie. So she the way that they released it, they did some, she called it like, it was like a laser, like it was a non-invasive laser that allowed the tissue to pull apart on its own instead of like cutting it or creating pain for them. And that was one of the biggest things of like, for me, it was like, I don't want him to feel that pain. Like, I don't want him to be in pain. I don't want him to suffer, but I also want to be able to breastfeed him and him like actually like be satiated. And literally the release took like no more than 5 minutes, and he came back and I fed him, and like my breasts like felt like they were like they emptied. He was like so satiated, and like it was so I remember crying, like being like, oh my God, thank God that this worked, because it was it worked. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And then after that, it was just like, honestly, it was beautiful. Like it was a beautiful postpartum period. Like it was so nice. And I didn't honor it as much as I probably should have, because we also were moving in between. We were moving from our in-laws house to our apartment that we're in now. So I was packing, I was getting things ready to move. So I feel like I rushed my postpartum period. So this postpartum, I'm really like savoring every moment of it and just like making it very slow and very intentional and very sacred. Whoa.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, and is there anything different? Like, so you're kind of in the birth portal, ready to give birth and welcome baby, any moment, any day in the next few weeks. Has this pregnancy been different for you? And are you preparing for birth in any different way?
Yeah, so this pregnancy has been like completely different. Like I started to tap into like my own intuition very deeply, like just very in tune with my body, very in tune with my baby, very in tune with like my womb. And I started to like, when I started like tapping into these places, I started noticing more creation coming through me. So like I started to write more and like create more. And we just finished closing up the container that we just created together, which was the Village of Sacred Motherhood. And it was, yeah, like the creation was just flowing through me. And it's so amazing to experience. And like, it just like it flows through you very effortlessly. Like that's what I've been experiencing. Like it flows very effortlessly, and like you don't like, I don't need to like control like the launching and all this stuff. Like it just flows very easily. So this is what I've been experiencing. And then like also like a lot of deep healing with like the inner masculine and inner feminine within me, like learning how to like surrender and receive, and like what it feels like for my masculine to like hold this space and like lead, but then like creating this structure and like letting my feminine energy just like flow and like receive. So that's what I've been like really playing with and like healing in this pregnancy, is that part of me. Yes. Well, yeah. A lot
Are
of
you
healing.
planning the same thing for your birth, like with a doula?
Well, I first hired a what?
Oh no.
There is more snow, I know.
Didn't go no.
You're gonna, well, yeah, if there's,
Yeah, happy.
you're happy that there's more snow? Me too. Maybe we can go play outside after the snow. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sounds like a good plan. So I hired a traditional birth attendant, companion, and it didn't align with me anymore, because I really want to focus on this birth of having just like complete intimacy. Like just complete intimacy with like people that I'm very close with. Hold on. What?
How do you spell chicken?
CHICKEN. I want this like very intimate experience. And like when I picture the birth, I just picture my husband and myself.
Mm-hmm.
White, that's right. Good job. I just picture my husband and myself. And I didn't really like lean into that until after I'll write it down for you. Give it to me. Until like I told the traditional birth attendant that like I didn't want to have her there anymore. And that was one like, okay, here, give this to Liam. Liam, can you get your brother some paper and a marker, please? Liam, please and thank you. No? Okay, here's some paper. Here, draw on here. There you go. Yeah, so until like I fired I don't even want to use the word fired because it feels so like, it feels so like icky. But like, I guess I want to say dismissed her or like, yeah, I guess dismissed. I started to see like, I really wanted to just have me and my husband. Then I kind of had this feeling like maybe I wanted to have Alex there again because like I had such a close relationship with her, and that's what I really wanted was just that intimacy because that's what I wanted. That's just an intimate experience. And then it didn't align. She's not able to be at the birth. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take this as a sign of like, this is what's supposed to be. Like I already knew that I wanted just my husband and I, and obviously the universe is like working with us, and that's what's meant to happen. So we are it's going to be him and I together. Yeah, we're
Do you
gonna
have
be
someone for the kids, or do you feel like the kids will be okay being around?
I'm hoping that they're going to sleep. They're going to be sleeping during the entire birth, but you know what? I am open to whatever is supposed to happen and whatever is meant to be. I trust that everything is going to be exactly the way it's supposed to. And that's like my whole vibe for my whole pregnancy is just like trusting whatever is coming through and what's coming up is meant to come up. So a lot of fears have been coming up about like pain around birth and a lot of fear about like dying in birth and baby dying in birth and like what if something goes wrong in birth. And I've been really like working with those fears and releasing those fears, but it's been so beautiful because it's an opportunity for me to grow and for my soul to evolve. And that's like, yeah, that's part of the whole vibe of the whole pregnancy is like surrender, trusting the unknown, leaning into the unknown, and knowing that like whatever is meant to happen. Okay, we'll eat food. And whatever is meant to happen is what is going to happen. And that's yeah, so that's how I've been preparing for a birth. Is just like leaning into the surrender, trusting, and doing like my own inner healing and my own shadow work, and just allowing like whatever fears and whatever emotions that want to come up, whatever uncomfortable emotions that want to come up, just to like come up so they can be seen and moved. Because I feel like when we're in this space and these emotions and these experiences come up, it's because they want to be liberated, they want it to be freed, and they want to be seen and moved, because it's only going to take you into another deeper level of like your true essence of who you are.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I've been doing like I've gotten my cycle back now, and I feel like during pregnancy there's like a lot of times of like big emotional waves because there's so much shedding and expansion happening in pregnancy. And then in postpartum, it kind of like stalls because there's not time to doing all the inner work because you're like serving baby, you're doing outer work. And when I got my cycle back, I feel like that's the time where there's a bit more space for me to be doing that inner work again. And with every cycle, there's like usually an emotional, wave that comes either before or right after a bleed. And so for women listening, this work is amazing in pregnancy to be stretching and releasing and shedding layers. And I'm personally doing it now with my cycle. Whenever there's like a big emotion that often we see it as negative and we want to run away from it and distract ourselves, I'm using the mantra like, I'm willing to be here and I'm willing to see you and I'm willing to feel. And
Mhm.
kind of like what you're talking about, like breathing and describing what I'm feeling in my body. If there's any visions, like allowing any visuals to come up and just allowing it to be and move and change. And yeah, in pregnancy, it's like such juicy
Yeah.
time to be doing that work. I remember, yeah, doing that before he was born, before his free birth as well.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful to have a picture of like a dream birth that we have. And sometimes it's not what we expect, you know, it's
Mhm.
like, but I would like to have a friend there. And it's like, well, like, but the dream is this, you know,
Yeah.
it's like the consciousness is showing us what we truly want. And it's like, are we ready to want it and to allow
Mhm.
ourselves to want it and to allow for it to happen? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And like I feel like there's like when things like manifest or like I want like quote unquote obstacles that happen, and when we actually like lean into them and like look at them as like what? Actually, you broke Jack. Luna didn't break Jack. You broke Jack. Like I feel like when obstacles and these like bumps in the road happen, it's like an opportunity for us to like, okay, what is here? What needs to be seen? Why is this happening? What is this like showing me? And when we lean into it and we honor these obstacles as just like reflections of like what needs to move through, it creates like this like foundation and layer of like, okay, I'm here. I can move through this. What is this leading me towards? Like,
Mm-hmm.
for an example, I found out that I had a hernia in the early part of my pregnancy. And I was like, okay, something is here. What needs to be seen? Damien, don't throw, please. What is here? What needs to be seen? What is this like? What is this experience telling me? And what came up was like, I'm living too externally and I'm looking outside of myself more. And this
Mm-hmm.
opportunity of like, okay, hey, this hernia is here, but it's not actually what is going on. It is an invitation of coming back into yourself and exploring and like deepening your connection with your inner world.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And quickly, we're already going over an hour, but I wanted to ask, I know that we did a QHHT session together because it's something that I love to do, especially with pregnant women, because I'm so
Mhm.
passionate about pregnancy and birth and, you know, supporting women to have the, you know, easiest, smoothest experiences they can have. So I love the work of quantum healing in pregnancy. And so how was that for you? And, you know, did it help, or how did you find that it like helped you in your pregnancy journey?
Yeah, so I love the QHHT session. It was like it blew my freaking mind the things that like came up and the things that I seen. But one thing that really stuck with me was when we got into like the higher self piece was
Mm-hmm.
um when like I think it was you asked the question of like I can't remember exactly the question, but it was about my postpartum and being taken care of in my postpartum. And what came up was like just to surrender and like I'll be taken care of. And as
Oh
soon as that
yeah.
experience happened, I had so many friends and so many people message me say, "Hey, if you need any help or if you need somebody to come over after you've given birth to like cook or take care of the kids, like let me know, I'll be there." And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never had any of this like during my first postpartum, but like now I have like so many people messaging me saying, hey, I want to take care of you. Like, let me know how I can take care of you. Let me know how I can serve you while you're in your postpartum period. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, this is amazing. Like my higher self came in and told me that I'll be taken care of. And now like all these people are like just like magnetizing to this experience and like really like showing me like, hey, you are going to be taken care of. There's nothing that you need to worry about. So that was
Mm.
like one of the biggest like pieces that I took was that.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I'm so excited for you. And I look forward to having you back on to
Yeah.
tell us your birth story and how postpartum goes. Before we close, is there anything you'd like to share to any woman listening right now?
Yeah, just anything that like manifests in like your pregnancy, like anything that you perceive as like an obstacle or something that's like holding you back, just like lean into it and just ask, like, what is this showing me? Where is this taking me? What wants to be felt and what wants to be seen here? Because every single thing that happens in your pregnancy journey is literally an opportunity for you to see what's going on within yourself. So whatever's happening externally, outside of you, it's happening within you, and it's giving you an opportunity to see like what wants to reveal itself. And it's also a beautiful opportunity to start understanding like you more, and like understanding your true essence of who you are, and like what wants to be revealed, like the truth of yourself.
That's so beautiful. Hey, Marissa, thanks. I'm going to turn off the recording.
You draw Spider-Man?